Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It's time for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is I, Dr. Michael Lennox, here with my co-host and producer, Zoe. Welcome to June.
Hello. Happy Pride.
That is right. It is Pride Month. It is summertime a-coming. The days are getting longer. It's also not April and May. I like that. Those were such rough months. And, we started June last week, and we talked a little bit about the first few days in June. This is our first weekly podcast of the full-on month of June, and it's just a gentler, easier month than the last couple that we're coming out of. Not that there aren't the usual sort of cast of characters in, new moons and full moons and whatnot. And this week is actually a little remarkable because we have 3 ingresses, 3 planets changing signs. So while there aren't enormous bumpy transits this week, there are certainly some really interesting things happening of note, and we are going to talk about them all. Unequivocally, the big news of today, this week, and this month is Venus moving into Leo, which she does today. So she's just coming out of Cancer, 3.5 weeks of tenderness and sort of loving attention to our vulnerable spaces and our inner feelings, a kind of protective sensibility. And Venus in Leo is beautifully exuberant and warm and gregarious. We are expressive about our feelings and our love, impulses with Venus in this fiery, extroverted, sun-ruled sign. But the big news isn't so much that Venus is changing signs, but that she's going to stay here for the next 4 months. We got another Venus retrograde coming up strong this summer.
Does Venus in Leo mean hot girl summer? That's like immediately what I thought about after you said that.
It does for you. Because it won't be hot girl summer for me. But yes, not to be sort of like, it's kind of adorable. But yes, Venus in Leo is out and proud and loud with expressions of love, right? And, in the archetype of the zodiac, most people think that Scorpio invented sex, but it didn't. Scorpio energy is what makes sex powerful, transformative, healing, and ultimately potentially creative when two people make a baby. Procreation. When procreation is involved. But really, the juice of the Venus in retrograde is that we're going through a process this summer that's going to transform how we give and receive love. So the warning isn't so much is it hot girl summer, it's that hot girls from the past might return this summer because that's a hallmark of Venus retrogrades. Very often, though we're a few months out before Venus actually turns around, but Venus retrogrades are notorious for bringing back our exes.
That has already started for me, by the way.
Well, when it happens, or should it happen in like late July or anytime during September, that would be a moment to say, oh, my psyche, my soul is asking me to reevaluate where my love language has taken me. As opposed to a signal to reinvest in that relationship. It's not impossible to kindle love in a Venus retrograde, but it has complications. I will obviously be talking about this a lot as the summer progresses. But it does start, let me be clear. It starts that we are exploring a different language of the heart today with Venus moving into Leo. Venus will not begin the first part of the retrograde shadow where we have to start paying attention to matters of the heart because we're going to be dealing with them later. That doesn't happen until June 18th, right? So we are still a good 2 weeks away from where it counts to be paying attention to matters of the heart or relationship issue dynamics or financial challenges, because Venus also rules our finances. But we are moving into this territory where the planet of love, who usually spends 3.5 weeks in a sign, will be here in Leo until the end of the first week in October. So we got a lot of time spent in this sign. Venus goes retrograde roughly every 18 months to 2.5 years. It's not regular like Mercury's or Pluto's retrograde, but it's frequent. And while I will talk about this more when we get going, it's an interesting Venus retrograde this summer as hearkening back to the summer of 2015. Because Venus went retrograde in the same degree points, or many of the same degree points in late Leo that she did in 2015. So again, I will talk more about this when we get closer and when it counts, but it starts that our emotional body is moving into territory where in the weeks and months to come, we are going to be going into the unconscious a little bit, having some bumpy experiences in our emotionality that will leave us transformed by the time we get into the fall in how we live in our hearts. All personal planet retrogrades are important. It's only Mercury that happens with clockwork. Every 88 days for 22 days, Mercury goes retrograde in this completely precise mechanism. The heart and the body, Venus and Mars, not with such precision, but they are important, even if they're a little bumpy. So just get ready for a little bit of a ride this hot girl summer, and just know that we're going to come out the other end better givers and receivers of love. Okay, so the other planetary ingress, so the second of three, is our friend Pluto. Pluto is retrograde right now, which means he's moving backwards. And next Sunday, the 11th, Pluto's going to backtrack into Capricorn once again. Now, if you guys have been listening to me for any appreciable amount of time, you will know this, that I don't put any stock into you, listeners, needing to pay attention to retrograde cycles from Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the outer planets. This is a general sort of thing that I have to say. You will see tons of memes about these various retrogrades and direct motions as if they mean something to us as people who are using astrology to day by day contextualize your life. The outer planets represent movements in our higher self, our soulful self. And I don't know about you, but I don't have access to that part of myself on a Tuesday. Right? I live in my three-dimensional embodiment with as much sensitivity, openness, and practice-designed connection to energy and existence itself. And in that regard, I consider myself somebody who moves through life very connected to my higher self and responding to it in a pedestrian kind of way. But it's still this sort of other dimensional energy, so that when Pluto moves forward and then Pluto moves backwards, I promise you, it's no different for you in your body. You're not going to approach change and transformation differently because Pluto is direct or Pluto is retrograde. Nothing's going to change in your experience, kids.
It's more socially globally, think that, right? That things are changing?
Right. It will reflect, yes. And the reason I'm even talking about Pluto being retrograde right now isn't because of the retrograde portion of what he's doing, but because this year and next year, the planet of the deepest sort of power and gravitas that reflects humongous changes on the planet brings about or reflects really deep changes out there when he changes signs. And so it is, in fact, interesting that in 2023, he's crossing over this threshold like 3 times, and he'll do the same thing next year. Moving into Aquarius, retrograding and backing up, then going direct and moving back in, and then retrograding and back into. So there's these 5 passes this year and next year. And again, I'm telling you about this, kids, but I'm going to also caveat this as let this be interesting to you in terms of how astrology works, but please don't take this on as something you have to figure out in terms of how to navigate your life, because it can make a fucking bit of difference.
Let me ask you this, though. At some point, I can't remember if it was 2020 or 2021, but you started the year off talking about the Pluto placement in the United States of America.
Yes.
Does the Pluto retrograde affect our society based on the American Pluto placement?
That is probably the best question you've ever asked me, Zoe. So you're talking about the Pluto return of the United States chart, right? So where Pluto came back to where he was when the Declaration of Independence was signed, was basically a 2022 thing, which really made last year a kind of dynamic and powerful reflection of all of the underbelly of the United States becoming sort of visible, made clear and revealed unequivocally. Like, as of last year, there's no more hiding any of the skeletons in the United States closet. And that was as a result of the Pluto return. So now Pluto has moved on from 27 degrees of Capricorn. So far from 27 degrees of Capricorn, he actually entered Aquarius this year and is turned around by retrograde a few weeks ago and will go back into Capricorn on Sunday. Now, he won't go so far back into Capricorn that he will trigger directly the USA Pluto return, because he won't go to 27. But he is back in that sign as of Sunday, which means the United States psyche is going to receive a squeeze from Pluto in the direction of revealing more shadow by backtracking back into Capricorn. So the next bunch of months might show an elevation. And think about what's happening in the country right now. In fact, wait till July, kids, when I start talking about Pluto and the nodes in a square and the indictment that's coming for President Trump at the same time as that square. Like, we got a lot to talk about in like July about the United States and politics and things that are breaking down. But to your question, yes, I think we will see that when Pluto backtracks into Capricorn, the next bunch of months will reflect some squeezes in the United States. And that next year we'll see the same thing, that when he backtracks into Capricorn next year, which he will also do a third and final time, that might also reflect bigger revelations in the landscape of the, you know, the United States as panties being shown to the world. So it's interesting that next week this shift happens. Pluto will move back into Capricorn only as far as October 11th will allow him to move. And then I'm not looking at my program, so it's, you know, he's going to go back in about 1.5 degrees, probably. So 28 and 29 of Capricorn. And then on October 11th, he goes direct, and then he will re-enter Aquarius in the 3rd week of January. But that won't be the final time that he backtracks into Capricorn. He'll do that again next year. Now, if you have any planets or points in your natal chart at 28, 29, or 0 degrees of anything, this backtracking will impact you. Like, my sun is at 29 degrees of Leo and my Venus is at 28 degrees of Leo. So I'm right now in a 2-year transit of Pluto in conjuncting my Venus and Sun, the great eliminator. So I'm going through all sorts of subtle but significant changes, both in my sense of identity and in how I approach love and intimacy. That Venus retrograde is conjuncting my Venus this summer, so it's going to be an interesting year for me in the heart. But if you don't have planets at 28, 29, or 0 degrees of any sign, then this Pluto ingress isn't hitting you directly. The Pluto retrogrades are like the pendulum of a clock, where the Mercury retrogrades are like the inner spring. People have heard me say this before. My father was a watchmaker,
Right.
and so I grew up around watches and clocks, right? So I know a lot about watches and clocks. And so it's interesting, old-timey watches and clocks that had to be wound to run, they have an inner spring that you wind up really tightly, and then it unfolds, and that's what runs the clock. That's a little bit like Mercury retrogrades. We wind up as Mercury's moving direct. We get sort of disloaded of that stuff when Mercury goes retrograde, and it's like the inner spring being wound and unfurling, being wound and unfurling. Then the very final planet in the solar system that we work with, Pluto's like the pendulum. Tick, tock. 6 months forward, 5.5 backwards. 6 months forward, 5.5 backwards, moving a few degrees each time, like a pendulum. So there's something like a heartbeat that Pluto is doing at a cosmic level. It's another reason why you don't need to pay attention to whether he's direct or retrograde. It's just something that our bodies are very oriented towards in such a way that it's not going to feel like a huge distinction. At any rate, suffice to say that both 23 and 2024 have a roughness to them because Pluto destroys things when he enters a sign and rebuilds them in a kind of death rebirth way. And so on some kind of psychic way, we're all passing through great amounts of this death rebirth consciousness this year and next year as the planet of death and rebirth crosses signs. Again, interesting if you want to know more about how astrology is working, but not something you should plan your weekend around.
Right.
The third planet that's changing signs this week is also on Sunday, same day as Pluto. Our friend Mercury is moving into Gemini, one of his ruling signs. This is actually kind of yummy for everything from the neck up for us. First of all, Gemini is one of Mercury's ruling signs, so he is coming home on Sunday, if you will. So that communication becomes clearer. The ideas we have, we share easily and organically. Gemini is all about connecting and sharing. So it's when Mercury is in that sign, we're chatty, our mouths are open, and we're connecting. But what's most lovely about it is that we are also entering the 2 months of what I refer to as the free and clear portion of Mercury's cycle. There's no retrograde in sight, kids. In fact, when we get into August, that's when he'll start triggering the first portion of his next retrograde cycle. But it means all of June and all of July, we are in clear communication with no retrograde in sight. And starting Sunday, we have 2.5 weeks of really open and clear communication and the desire to connect and share ideas with Mercury in this sign. Now, there's something interesting that happens on Sunday with this ingress of both Pluto and Mercury because they connect in a trine on Sunday from Mercury at the last degree of Taurus and Pluto moving into the last degree of Capricorn. In other words, Pluto changes signs early in the day. Mercury trines Pluto, backtracked into Capricorn, and then dives into Gemini. So that means we're getting some kind of download on Sunday around change and transformation and things from the underworld that we might need to know. I would call that transit alone as capable of delivering previously hidden messages for us. Because Mercury's going to do this trine from an earthy place, like late in Taurus, where we're grounded in the heart and in our very bodies. That's early in the day on Sunday, where then Mercury will reach across the solar system to the great transformer, death and rebirth planet Pluto, generate a trine, which is like a download of shadow information into our minds and hearts, Mercury in Taurus. And by the end of Sunday, Mercury drops into Gemini and may just offer some of us some clarity, some wisdom, some ideas that really came out of our shadow places from this little interaction between Mercury and Pluto on Sunday. Now, again, this is one of those transit and moments in astrology that's probably more about how interesting it is than how valuable it is to pay attention to. So I want to be really clear when I'm presenting something to you guys that is about something that's interesting and synchronistic and clever and elegant about what the planets are doing, as opposed to, giving some strident message that you're all going to be delivered an important message on Sunday. And it's like, well, some of you will, some of you won't. But it's certainly cute and interesting and elegant that Mercury and Pluto trine each other just as the sign change is happening. I think it reflects a grace with the planet-changing signs that might not otherwise be there. But I don't know. I'm just making this up.
A grace with the shadow message, you're saying.
Right. But Pluto moving into a new sign is an ungraceful act. Yes. It's not really accurate, but it's a significant energy change that can trip us up. Mm-hmm. So I think the mind getting aligned with Pluto just as he's already made the change and then taking that awareness into the highly perceptive Mercury and Gemini, I think maybe grace isn't the right word, but ease of some sort will happen in a manner that you might not know the difference, but it reminds me of that joke of like that male mosquitoes don't bite but make a sound, and female mosquitoes bite but don't make a sound, so that if you can't sleep and there's a mosquito buzzing, don't worry about it. But if you hear nothing, now this is a superstitious joke.
It.
I mean, it's a joke. But the point is, it's like setting somebody up to be like confounded by looking for something that's not findable. Like if there's no sound in your room, there's a mosquito out to get you. But back to my point about people with 28, 29, or 0-degree planet placements being more impacted by Pluto changing signs. Same thing that Mercury is at the 30th degree of Taurus on Sunday, making this trine. The people who are going to be more likely delivered some sort of an aha message from below the surface are probably people with planets at 27, 28, 29, 0, 1 degree of any sign. Because that transit then is dialing into your chart. Which is why it's good to know how your charts work, kids. And if you don't know how your chart works and you're interested in that, I can't believe I'm doing a shameless plug, but I'm getting ready to relaunch my Astrology 101, teaching you how to read your natal chart this summer, because that lights up my heart. And so I will be spending all summer offering a new version of my course, Astrology 101. So you guys can look for that information as the summer progresses. And in the meantime, for this week, have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week for dreams, we have an email-in dreamer, and as you mentioned before, we have such a backlog. I picked a dream from 2022, and it's actually from you,
cool.
Michael. At the top, it says, Zoe, this is a lifelong friend who shares her dreams with me now and then. She sent it to me by text for the podcast. So I don't know the name of this dreamer, but it's a friend of yours.
I didn't say?
No.
Oh, fuck, that was a big mistake. Because if you have any thought that I might remember who this is, like, I could have sent this to you on, like, last week, and I wouldn't remember. Like, my memory is like Teflon.
Okay.
But part of that is because I hold space almost every day for years hearing stories of deep intensity. And I'm in full presence when I'm receiving all of this information. So I've developed a really good inner sense of Teflon where things just don't stick. And that's cultivated, and it helps. It's like my survival. Of course, it's challenging when friends, when I say, I don't remember. And then I have a quantum memory, which means it's like even with clients, I won't remember a client, but then they'll say something in the first 10 minutes and I'll remember everything about, anyway, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sorry, whomever this is, I love you. I'm sure. If you're a lifelong friend, sorry that I don't remember. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. Let's see what my lifelong friend dreamer is dreaming about.
So this, I don't know. I brought this dream because it's just like random bits and pieces.
Okay.
So your friend says, in my dream, there was a locked door and I heard a dog. When I opened it, the dog came out and I grabbed it so it wouldn't pee on the carpet. But I was going to take it outside. I was with somebody else, and I asked that person to find a leash because I, too, had to go up to the bathroom. I saw a little boy in a chair who is bound and gagged, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I asked him, who did this to you? In my mind, I thought it was a man that I know, the husband of a woman I know who is an alcoholic, kind of a heavy drinker. Then I woke up.
Okay,
so it's like kind of odd
bits
and pieces. I don't know what you would make of this.
Okay, well, let's see. I mean, one of the easiest things to do in a kind of like random isolated image dream that this is let's just look at all the dream images and see what kind of a story emerges. Which we start with a locked door.
Right.
Like right there. Like that's what's beautiful about interpreting dreams is the first image always tells you what to expect that the dream is going to be talking about.
Okay.
And when we write out our dreams, we're codifying stuff from the unconscious, which means the language we use counts. So we start at a locked door, all right? Like the very first image tells us that there's something our dreamer needs access to, but doesn't quite have yet. But not forever, because the implication of a locked door is that there is ultimately going to be a key or the capacity to open that door somehow. So the dream is absolutely about a piece of wisdom that our dreamer needs, but that at the moment isn't quite accessible to them. There's a hint, though, and that's where the dog comes in. I heard a dog. So in symbolism land, we think of our pets as beautiful symbols of unconditional love.
Especially dogs.
Well, don't say that to a cat person.
Okay.
Because I would agree But in the spirit of honoring both our dog lovers and our cat lovers, we created domesticated pets in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways to have access to this kind of love. So a dog in a dream is going to be speaking to some relationship with unbridled enthusiasm for life, joy, and love. I have to tell the joke every time. This is a dad joke I've said 1,000 times whenever, dogs come up in dreams. It's like, lock your dog and your boyfriend in the trunk of your car for 3 days, and who's happy to see you? So,
okay, I have not heard that one.
Okay. My joke wasn't lost. Yeah, it's
that's
hysterical.
hilarious.
So, locked door, dreamer who
my
needs
God.
something that there is ultimately a key for, and it probably has something to do with unbridled joy, unconditional love, and accessing that. So the dog comes out. There's a door that opens. I assume it's not the locked door, but maybe it is. But a door is open and a dog comes out. And then so now we're in this interesting thing that our dreamer is interacting with a symbol that means love, but worried about toxicity. So I want to grab this love and control it so that it won't pee on my carpet. So that's interesting to me, that the dream is saying, well, I'm locked out of something, and then when love shows up, my first thought is, will this toxicity, stain me, ruin me, smell me out, something, pee on my carpet. So then there's this effort to sort of manage this experience, manage this dog. I was going to take it outside, she says. And then there's someone else in the dream that says, can you help me with this? So there's an aspect of dreamer that shows up in this form of I was with someone else. Can you find a leash? So now we've got the dreamer is asking for a part of herself to rise up who knows how to handle a relationship with love that is controlled and manageable, dog on leash. Now, the dog has to go to the bathroom, and so does she. So in both of these bathroom things, the dogs need to pee and the dreamers need to go to the bathroom, does mean we are in a dream about the toxic elements that are present even in loving circumstances.
Because they both have to pee?
Yeah, because they're both trying to release toxicity. Humans in bathrooms as a symbol from a house, room, and the meaning of that room, bathrooms are about individuation, where we are privately ourselves, the place where we get to close the door and really know who we are, inclusive of our poopy smell. So our dreamer needing a bathroom in the dream is a reflection of her searching for a deeper, more intimate relationship with herself in an individuated kind of way. But we have to draw a line between the dog needs to pee and the dreamer needs to pee, and then urination as a symbol of this is how I consistently release the toxicity that can build up so that I can love more freely. Then we have yet another sort of locked door, can't find the bathroom, obstacle image of this little boy bound and gagged in a chair.
This is the part that I'm like, how does this relate and what is going on here?
So when a child shows up in a dream and we have an age or a sense of the age, there are two ways you can look at this. One I prefer, one I don't. Both are valid. So if this little boy is 4 years old, we can look back at our dreamer's experience at 4 years old. Mm-hmm. And how might they have been bound and gagged in a way that felt unloving? So a little 4-year-old bound and gagged in a chair might be a response to a little boy who's trying to just be a little boy and is being controlled and managed and sort of held back. So, and it's a boy, not a girl, so it's about masculine principle and doing and sort of being activated, that there might be an interesting message around unbridled joy, enthusiastic expression, dog, that got squeezed in for this dreamer at around 4 years old. And then the dreamer decides to find out more about this. Who did this to you? And it gets traced back to some major sense of dysfunction. A husband who's a heavy drinker. So the symbolism there says some dysregulated, challenged behavior in the system, heavy drinking husband, bound and gagged our dreamer in some way, inhibiting sort of unbridled joy and loving expression. The other way of looking at an age that I prefer is to look at what was going on in our dreamer psyche 4 years ago. Did some conflict rise up, or a relationship that is constricting in some way that now needs some attention that might have risen up 4 years or so ago? Either way, 4 years ago or our dreamer at 4 years old, I think there's a worthy exploration of both. And for me, it's going to be about limits to moving about the world in a more joyful, unbridled, enthusiastic, and unconditionally loving way.
This makes me really curious about which friend of yours this is.
Oh God, yes. I'm almost tempted to look into my phone and backtrack to 22. I don't know how far.
Just text everyone and ask them what they were doing 4 years ago.
I can't imagine you would have a month associated with it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fran Sama.
Oh my God, Franny. Well, listen. Well, hi, Franny. Yeah, thank you for this dream. Sorry it took so long.
That is my fault. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay. Well, I know that Fran is somebody who has great consideration around the impact of family dynamics. That could be said of anybody in my life. There's nobody in my life who isn't on that page, right? Or why would they stay in my life? So for Franny, I would be it could be in consideration of what was happening in the family of origin in that 3, 4, 5-year-old time that bound and gagged the part of you that wanted to move about more enthusiastically. Mm-hmm. And, look at 4 years ago. But I'm glad to have identified this as Franny's dream because I know Franny and I know the thoughtfulness that she has applied to her life. And I think this dream this dream interpretation will land for her. At least I'm certainly hoping it will. And Franny, let me know. Send another text if you hear this episode of the pod.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.